Something is happening in Berea right now, and I don't think most people covering it are actually seeing it clearly. 2 OTA sessions in, and the conversation has already collapsed into the same tired debates, the depth chart, the contract, the legacy questions, the noise that fills the dead air between now and the start of real football. And I get it. That's the easy story. That's the story that gets clicks and generates arguments in comment sections. But I've spent more time with the footage from these first 2 practices than I'm going to pretend is normal or healthy, and what I found underneath all that noise is genuinely worth your attention. Let me tell you what I actually saw. Before any of this started, Todd Monken did something that most coordinators don't do. He told everyone exactly how he was going to run this competition. Not in vague terms, not in the kind of coach speak that sounds meaningful but commits to nothing. He laid out a specific methodology. Merit-based rep distribution, rotation across different personnel environments, an evaluation architecture built to generate real data rather than confirm a predetermined story. And then day 2 arrived, and he actually executed what he described. Shedeur Sanders was taking live snaps with the first team offense in 11-on-11 team periods, not in a ceremonial capacity, not because someone wanted a feel-good moment for the cameras. In the most competitive real estate on a practice field in May, first team reps in team periods are where a coaching staff actually learns things. That's where decisions get made. And everything that comes out of that building between now and the end of minicamp needs to be understood through that context. Now I need to address the interception, because I'm not someone who pretends things didn't happen when they inconvenience a narrative I want to protect. Sanders threw one on day 2. I watched it more times than I want to count, partly because I'm aware of my own investment in how this evaluation unfolds, and I owe it to myself and to anyone listening to actually stress test my read before I say a word about it. So I did. I pushed against my instincts. I looked for every angle that supported the harshest interpretation. Here's what the footage actually shows. The decision architecture on that play is sound. Sanders moves through his progression correctly. His eyes travel in sequence. The read he lands on is defensible given what the play design is asking. The legitimate criticism is in the timing, a half beat late on the release, the ball coming just behind the receiver's break rather than in the moment the receiver commits to the route. A half beat earlier, and the defensive back rotating through the zone never closes the angle that created the problem. That's real. That's a fair critique, and I'm not walking it back. But then I looked at Jeudy, and this is where the accounting gets genuinely complicated. At the moment the ball arrives, Jeudy has a full yard of separation from the nearest defender, a full yard, on a route that is asking him to do one thing: catch a ball delivered cleanly into space, protect it from the closing corner, and finish. That's all. Instead, Jeudy stops his momentum, which is already wrong, and then leaves the ground on a throw that is absolutely not asking him to leave the ground. He jumps at a ball delivered into a clean window, designed for a routine completion. The tip happens, the interception happens, and every single piece of coverage logged it under the quarterback's name, which is where people left it. I'm telling you, the full accounting is messier. A receiver with a yard of separation does not jump at a well-placed throw unless something in his own processing broke down. I genuinely looked for the argument that saved him on that play. I didn't find it. What stays with me more than the interception itself, though, is what happened in the seconds immediately after. The cameras caught Sanders on the sideline, and I want you to actually think about what I'm describing here, because this detail matters more than any statistical output from a May practice session. He wasn't staring at the turf. He wasn't sitting alone with his helmet down, letting the embarrassment metabolize in silence. He wasn't scanning the field, looking for somewhere to redirect the moment. He was in active conversation with his quarterback coach, breaking the play down in real time, fully present in the session, treating a bad outcome in a voluntary spring practice exactly the way a bad outcome in a voluntary spring practice deserves to be treated, as information, not as a wound to carry, not as a story to manage for the cameras, as something to process and use. I've watched young quarterbacks for a long time, and I promise you this matters. The behavioral response to a mistake in non-padded OTA conditions is one of the most revealing things you can observe about the psychological architecture of a competitor. The ones who actually reset, not who perform resetting, not who do the PR version of moving forward, but who genuinely return their attention to the work and stay in it. Those are the ones who show up differently when November games are real. Sanders passed that test cleanly. Almost no one is talking about it. Now I need to talk about Denzel Boston, and I'm going to ask you to stay with me on the level of detail here, because if you miss the specifics of what I watched on this one route, you miss the entire point of it. There was a rep he ran against Tevin Coleman on day 2 that I have gone back to more times than I should probably admit. And before I describe it, you need to understand the context. Coleman is not a practice body. He's not a guy filling a warm roster spot on a voluntary OTA list. Andrew Berea acquired him mid-season from Jacksonville. He played real real snaps for this team in games that mattered. He earned his position by producing under actual NFL conditions. So when I tell you Boston dismantled him on a single route, I'm not describing a second-round rookie beating a placeholder. I'm describing a second-round rookie applying a level of technical precision against a functioning NFL cornerback that should completely reframe how this league evaluates him. Here's what actually happened. Because the genius of the route lives entirely in the details a casual watch will never catch. Boston comes off the line playing controlled, deliberate. There's none of that anxious, unfocused speed that young receivers who haven't found themselves yet tend to play with, that raw quickness defensive backs can categorize in about half a second. Instead, Boston applies intentional directional weight toward the boundary. His shoulder drops, slightly, but enough. And what that shoulder is communicating to Coleman in the real-time language of route running is vertical threat. Open your hips. Prepare to run deep. Coleman's hips open, fully. And I need you to understand what that means mechanically, because the moment those hips rotate completely, the play is already over. A corner with fully open hips cannot redirect cleanly in any other direction. There is no lateral change of direction available from that position. He has to reset his base, reestablish his feet, redistribute his weight from a platform that was never built for changing directions. All of that requires time, and Boston knew it was going to require that time because he engineered the entire situation specifically to steal it from him. The actual break is just punctuation on a sentence that was written 3 steps earlier. Coleman's feet come together in that choppy, desperate adjustment that every defensive backs coach in the country loses sleep watching on film. Weight distributed wrong, base too narrow to push off cleanly, trying to redirect from a position that structurally will not support redirection. Boston is already creating separation before Coleman's feet find the ground again. And then, on top of a route that was already decided, the size arrives as a closing argument. 6'4", full momentum committed to one direction, bearing down on a corner who just had his mechanical foundation taken apart. At that point, it stops being a route and becomes a physics problem with no solution. But here's what I keep returning to. The separation was decided before size was even a relevant variable. It was decided in the stem, in the shoulder, in the 3 steps that manipulated Coleman's hip rotation and destroyed his ability to redirect. The size just made the conclusion louder. The argument was already over. I've heard people say Boston wins purely on body, that he doesn't have the quickness to create separation against corners who refuse to let the size matchup beat them. I want those people to watch that specific route and tell me, frame by frame, exactly where the separation came from. Tell me how early in the sequence Coleman was already beaten. That criticism does not survive the footage, and I genuinely think there are NFL front offices that are going to spend real time this fall wishing they had looked more carefully at his tape before draft weekend. Let me address the depth chart reporting because I think it's generating anxiety in this conversation that the actual situation simply doesn't support. The reporting out of day 2 has Watson first, Sanders second, Gabriel third, Mond fourth. I understand why that produces a reaction. The instinct to read a stated depth chart as a meaningful signal about competitive standing is a completely natural one. But let me give you some grounding, because context transforms what that information actually means. This is day 2 of voluntary OTA sessions, 2 practices. The coaching staff has collected exactly 2 sessions of data, and the coordinator running this evaluation told you before any of it started that his methodology specifically involves rotating quarterbacks across units on different days so that no single day's ordering carries coherent information about where the competition genuinely stands. A reported depth chart after 2 voluntary OTAs inside an evaluation designed from the ground up to prevent early ordering from carrying meaning is the least interesting thing coming out of that building right now. The label is not the story. The story is in the film. And the film keeps pulling me back because the throws Sanders was making with first-team reps in those 11-on-11 periods are not matching the narrative that spent a year circulating around this kid in the pre-draft conversation. The progression works specifically. There's a rep where you can track his eyes moving through a read in real time, primary to second option, delivery, and the ball has genuine velocity on it, real zip. The arm strength concern that got repeated by enough voices for long enough that people stopped questioning whether it was ever actually rooted in evidence doesn't match what I'm watching on this practice field. And I've genuinely started asking myself whether that story was ever supported by the tape or whether it became true through repetition. What commands my attention more than the arm though, and what gets almost no coverage relative to how important it actually is the pocket mobility. And I want to be precise because I'm not describing scrambling. I'm not talking about a quarterback who breaks outside the structure and turns a third down into a foot race. I'm talking about functional interior movement, the capacity to feel pressure developing before it arrives, slide into available space inside the pocket, shift the release angle, and locate a throwing lane that didn't exist when the ball was snapped. In these 2 sessions, Sanders did this on multiple plays. He slid laterally. He stepped up into developing pressure. He released through windows past traffic that a stationary quarterback would have converted into a sack or a panicked throw into coverage. That skill is essentially invisible when it's working. It doesn't generate highlights. It shows up as third down conversions that don't look spectacular. It shows up as sacks not taken instead of chunk losses on the stat sheet. It accumulates over a full season in ways that fundamentally change what an offense can sustain. And he's doing it in May, in a new system, with coaches he's just beginning to build a working relationship with, surrounded by teammates he hasn't developed real in-game chemistry with yet. That matters. The processing speed criticism, the argument that his decision-making operates behind the tempo of an NFL defense, was always the one I found least supported when I actually examined the evidence. What I'm watching in these OTAs doesn't look like a quarterback struggling to keep pace with a faster game. It looks like a quarterback who understands what the play design is asking, operates within the rhythm of that design, and delivers at the moment the window opens. That internal clock, the cognitive tempo that allows a quarterback to process and release in sync with what a defense is presenting, is one of the hardest things to manufacture in someone who doesn't already possess it naturally. You can coach footwork, you can refine release mechanics, you can build route recognition through repetition. You cannot easily install the instinct that lets a quarterback operate in rhythm with an NFL defense. Sanders appears to already have it. That means more than almost anything else I could tell you about his first 2 days on this field. In the interest of being genuinely complete here, Deshaun Watson had moments on day 2 that deserve honest acknowledgement. There was a throw over the middle to Cedric Tillman, delivered between 2 defenders with real placement and velocity, that reminded me exactly why organizations gave this quarterback franchise-level investment. Watson at functional capacity brings tools that are legitimately difficult to dismiss. The arm strength is real, the experience of navigating actual in-season pressure, of operating when a November game is on the line and the margin for error has closed completely. That is real too. I'm not going to stand here and tell you a former top overall pick contributes nothing to this competition. That's not analysis. That's just constructing the opposite narrative for the sake of a cleaner story. The running back room is a subplot that deserves considerably more attention than it's receiving. Quinshon Judkins broke SEC production records across 2 college seasons from the moment he arrived on campus. Dylan Sampson was the operational engine behind Josh Heupel's Tennessee offense functioning at a level the surrounding personnel couldn't fully explain on its own. And Raheem Sanders, I've been genuinely waiting to see what he does inside a real offensive structure since I started watching him seriously. There was a stretch at Colorado where Shedeur was leading the team in rushing yards out of pure necessity because the blocking had deteriorated past a functional threshold and the quarterback was doing the running back's job for him. Raheem came in during that stretch and completely altered the mathematical reality of what that offense could do. His production during those starts documents what a back with genuine ability does for an entire offense when he has even marginal support. The Sanders to Sanders connection getting early walkthrough reps together is a data point I'm actively carrying forward. On defense, Quentin Jefferson returning from injury with no reported restrictions and moving with real explosiveness in individual drills is a development that deserves considerably more coverage than it's currently getting. A healthy Jefferson changes the character of that defensive front in ways that extend outward to every player around him. Carson Swaim has generated consistent disruption in line work as well, a young player who, based on everything coming out of Berea, is operating significantly ahead of where his roster position would suggest he should be developmentally. This is a team with legitimate depth at positions that actually decide football games, and what's coming off that practice field carries the texture of a group that genuinely believes it can compete when it matters. The last thing I need to say is about Jeudy, and I want to be careful here because I'm not trying to define a career based on May practice footage, but I also can't pretend I haven't noticed what I've noticed. 2 OTA sessions in, and his name has appeared in connection with plays that didn't execute correctly on more than one occasion. Every quarterback on this roster is building an internal map right now, practice by practice, session by session, quietly recording information about which targets they can trust when the situation is real and the window is tight and a single throw decides the game. Quarterbacks don't forget what they see in practice. They file it, consciously or otherwise, and it shapes who they look for when November is real and everything is on the line. line. 2 sessions into voluntary OTAs, the footage involving Jeudy is something I'm watching carefully and will continue to watch. Whether it resolves into noise or reveals itself as the early signal of a real pattern, that is the exact question I'm carrying into the next practice. 2 days of football, weeks of real evaluation ahead. The depth chart listing is not what matters right now. It never is. The film is the story. It has always been the story. And right now, the film from Berea is more layered, more genuinely revealing, and more worth careful attention than most of what's being written about it will ever tell you.